Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Quirky Inspirations. I have the absolute joy and pleasure of introducing to you a dear person called Dan McPherson. Now, Dan is based in Michigan in the US.
That's right.
So Dan and I first connected through a networking group. And Dan was the person who interviewed me very early on in the piece, and he was the one who uncovered some very deep stuff for me and got it out to the world. And that was pivotal in plenty of relationships. So Dan, I absolutely honor you, sir, and thank you for that opportunity. I had no idea where we were going, but we will let you know where that is, and you can go back and check how much of an expert interviewer this guy is. So I'm turning the tables today and interviewing Dan McPherson, who, as I said, he's based in Michigan, but this is a gentleman who describes himself as a calm and clarity coach. Oh, tell us more.
Well, first, thank you so much for having me. You are lovely. I am honored that we were able to share your story and your brightness so much in the world. You are an absolute treasure, and I'm so thankful that we became connected through that lovely networking group and that we've been able to pull the thread through until now, and it's exciting. As far as what I do and who I am, I would say I am a calm and clarity coach. It isn't just what I do. I spent most of my life lacking in those two things. I was anything but calm, anything but patient, anything but clear. I was trying for that. I was fighting for that, but I never really found it. And over the last however many years, what I've come to understand very clearly is that there is only one path to true momentum, whether it be in life or business in the world. And it is calm, clarity, and focus in that order. Calm comes first. And getting to that space, calm, clarity, and focus to build momentum was powerful for me, and it felt like I unlocked secret of the universe, basically. And then I started asking a while back to my clients, I said, what do I do for you? And at first they said, well, you do everything. I'm like, that's great, and not at all marketable. So how in the world, like, help me out? And they said, well, you help us find calm, you help us get to a place of calm, and you help us understand the next steps we need to take to have clarity on those. And the light bulb went off, and finally I knew what label would actually make sense. And so we applied the label to me, I guess.
Right. So you were saying that calm has to come first. Now, I'm guessing, I kind of know, but I'm guessing that there was an experience for you in achieving that first step, that you are now able to go, bing, light bulb, let's help other people. So tell us a bit more about your journey to calmness.
Yeah, journey it was. It was more of maybe 1,000 experiences, sort of like the death by 1,000 cuts is how I was staying not calm. It was everything. My life was crazy, right? And you know some of my story for sure. I grew up hidden from my father for 6 years. I lived in poverty with my mother. I was bullied. I never had a place of calm. My brothers and sisters, I ended up exposed to violence and drugs and all that. And I survived suicide attempts. And that was just by the time I was 16. So I went through lots of craziness that wasn't calm in my life. Also, as part of that, I was so wound up that I was just impatient. I remember I would get feedback all the time, Dan, you're impatient, you're impatient, you're impatient. And they would say, you need to be more patient, which doesn't work, because anything that we're going to do in life, it's like telling somebody, calm down. That doesn't work very well, right? And but if they say, be more patient, it doesn't change the habit. Any habit that we're going to change, we need a replacement. We need something to fill that space that is positive and affirming to replace the negative thing. What I learned a few years ago on this path is that the replacement for impatience is eagerness. And so that shift from impatience to eagerness in my life was one of the 3 most transformative shifts that I've encountered. And as I made that shift, I found myself to be much more calm. And then I started working with my clients to recognize that if we find our calm and then we become the calm and then we're forward facing, we can really make progress. But calm it's an attractant, right? It draws people to us, and it is also contagious. So if we can get to that space, we win. And as I moved into that space, it changed everything in my life.
Hey, I'm going to backtrack a minute. Definition of impatience versus eagerness.
Yeah, I saw that one coming. Yes, it is. And it's not a conversation that I've heard in many places, but it once I unlocked this, so again, another secret of the universe that felt like it was revealed to me. Impatience is inward and downward. Impatience is often about entitlement. It is about a finish line mentality. So when you find yourself saying, well, if I just get through this, right, you're feeling impatient. You're expressing impatience. If you are feeling like, well, why didn't I get this? Or I deserve this, we're expressing impatience. If we're oddly enough, when we're dealing with anxiety and depression, something which I have way more knowledge of than I wish I did, there's a lot of impatience within that, even though it ends up becoming muted. Whereas eagerness is upward and outward. Eagerness is about learning and earning the steps forward, learning the path. Eagerness is not being wistful for the past or wishful for the future, but living in the space where you are. It really is the joy in the journey in many cases. But when you get to that space where you're content living in the present, where you're embracing not just the moment, but the path that you're on, you stop rushing through it. You stop trying to get past it to get to the future or go back and live in the past, but you live in the space where you are. And it is remarkable the calming impact that has.
That sounds great. Now, I'm going to ask you, where does that different? Do you feel a somatic difference? Is it the difference between overthinking and going into your heart? Is it a gut thing? Dig into that for me.
I find it to be multiple levels. I find it to be a very practical thing. There are specific mindsets or practical choices that we can make that reflect eagerness versus impatience. And that one of the beautiful things about that is you can train yourself, right? You can do the physical things that reflect eagerness. It's almost as acting as if in an effort to trigger back. But as with most things, I find that about 70% of what we learn is really about shifting our lens. It's about seeing it differently. If we see it differently, we'll know. There's a trio of phrases that I like to use. Awareness breeds improvement, decisions determine direction, and actions reflect priorities. Well, the first step is awareness breeds improvement. So if I have this awareness of it, I can get better at it. And that comes in really just seeing what I was talking about before of going, oh, yes, impatience looks and feels like this. That feel matters, right? How does it feel? And then you go, do I like that feel? Is that how I want to feel? Is that how I want to show up in the world? If it's not, then what does eagerness look like? What does it feel like? Oh, this is what it feels like. I like that feeling. And now we're drawn to it. That awareness says, I want to be drawn to that. Now I can make a decision. I want to move from A to B. That decision determines the direction that we're facing. But the walking part, the execution, the activity, the actions reflect priorities. That's where you get into the practical. Okay, now how do I do this? What are the things that it actually means? And how do I make it real in my life? And that's so important because how often do we have an action that doesn't reflect what we said were our priorities, but it does reflect what our priorities actually are?
Yes, because it's that what we tell ourselves at a conscious level, and actually what those internal scripts that we're running at an unconscious level that generally are running the script. They're running the show, aren't they? So
right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Thank you for that, because I'm discovering, personal share here, I'm discovering how much in the head and not doing the feely bit. And it's that feely bit that I'm leaning into, getting better at. So yes, thank you.
I love that. I spent all of my life in my head except that I was controlled by the feeling bit. So I wasn't engaging with it. It was there. It was controlling me. I talk to people all the time. I'm like, sit in the space and feel the thing, but don't allow it to control you. Like, understand your process, like acknowledge it, but in the end, make your decisions based upon the data, not emotion. Let the emotion inform you, but don't let it make the call.
Okay, thank you. So that's the calm. Take us through the calm into the clarity.
Sure. So once we get to calm, which I find for the majority of people, getting to calm, understanding calm, creating it, maintaining it, like that's the biggest part, because it's also the part that almost nobody talks about. And if it doesn't happen first, it's like a flywheel. None of the other pieces happen. If you find yourself in this little equation struggling with more than one of these, always pick the earliest one in the sequence, because they go in this order: calm, clarity, focus. For clarity is about what is the next steps, but it's also where am I going? So I look at clarity on two levels. Where do I want to end up? What is my North Star? You and I have spoken about that before. But what is that North Star that I'm aiming at? What do I want to be known for? Where do I want to go in the world? And then understanding how to reverse engineer that using, I would do it using a process that I call VSTT, vision, strategy, tactic, task. But I reverse engineer it so I make sure that everything in my life moves me in the direction of that North Star. But it's also within that, the clarity of, okay, what are the next steps that I need to take? What are these next things that if I do them, they'll get me to where I want to go, so that it doesn't feel overwhelming? Here's another, I know you love turn of phrase, so I'm going to give you another one, which is vague is overwhelming, specific is achievable.
Hang on, slow down. Do that again.
Yep. Vague is overwhelming.
Yes.
Specific is achievable.
Nice.
So if you are feeling overwhelmed, a very simple thing to do, and an important one, not always easy, but important, is to ask yourself, what piece of vagueness is causing me to feel overwhelmed? Almost exclusively, if you're feeling overwhelmed, there's something that is vague, that doesn't feel specific or achievable to you, that is causing that overwhelm. It could be that you were looking at 9 things instead of 1. There could be any number of things, but there's something that feels vague, even if it's whatever the path forward is. And the part of clarity here is looking and saying, what comes next? Not what comes later, what comes next.
Right. Literally, what is the next step in front of me?
Right. It's literally the taking the elephant one bite at a time, but it's understanding, where am I going to take that bite from? Because an elephant feels pretty overwhelming. You know, even saying take one bite of that elephant feels overwhelming. Because if I go bite near, somewhere on a leg and I get stomped on, that's a problem, right? And no elephants were harmed in the filming of this. So, but I think that when we have clarity, and think of yourself walking through this process, right? If you feel calm, if you get to a spot where you feel centered and you feel calm, you've calmed down your nervous system. All of those in the audience with knowledge of polyvagal theory, think of how important that is. The calmness opens the door of the mind to now start asking questions. Curiosity, in my mind, is the number one skill in the world, asking more and better questions. And it allows you to ask questions. And when you start asking, what comes next? And you're able to look at that and have a calm, now clear answer of what comes next, that takes you into the importance of focus. And it lets you get to that space where we focus, which I'm guessing is where you'd like to go next.
Following along the trail,
right? Right. It's a simple little track that we go down. So with focus, I share 2. In fact, in the class that I was teaching just before this, I shared 2 key principles around focus. And I'll give I know you like your visual examples, so I'll give you that for those as well. The first of those is to think of the flow of water like through a hose. Let's say you have water coming through a hose and it's the same amount of water, and you have it coming out of a sprinkler. And the hose ends in a sprinkler and the water sprays all over. It's gentle, it's nice, and maybe it grows some grass, maybe it falls on the pavement. It could have impact, it could have not, but it's not really going far. It's not really getting a lot done, or it's not getting it done fast, right? But if you take and you focus that water as tightly as you possibly can, the exact same amount of water, did you know that it will cut rock faster than a laser? Interesting. So my goal in focus, the benefit of focus, principle number one, is that you can cut through the rock of your life faster than a laser if you had the calm and the clarity to open up the focus, and you can focus really, really well. And yes, this works for all my ADHD friends as well, and all my creatives and all my intuitives who are like, oh, I did not me. Yes, it does. I promise 95% of the clients I work with are in that space. So it really does. So that's principle one, but principle two matters as well. And this is the why focus matters. So we just talked about what it can do. Now let's talk about why does it matter? Let's assume for a moment that you guys who are listening, have 5 different tasks that you need to do, and that each one of them would take a week. Well, our tendency, because we're humans and we like shiny things, and especially if we have ADHD and all that, we like to do all 5 at once. We just like to go bouncy, 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 and we do all 5. The challenge that comes from that is that when you do all 5 at once, well, I'll ask you, Wendy, how soon do you think the soonest one gets done?
Well, probably not within the week, actually.
It's week 10. The first one gets done 10 weeks later. You may be wondering why. It's because there's a thing called a task switching cost. There is a cost to going back and forth. Also, and this is the scarier part, maybe even than that, that's alarming enough that it'll take 10 times as long. There is only a 26% likelihood that the first one will ever get done.
Ooh.
Yeah, that one hurts.
Ooh.
So 5 tasks, the soonest one's going to be done in 10 weeks, and it's only a quarter likely to even happen. The last one's like 2% likely. If, on the other hand, I do them one at a time, and I will relieve the pressure for those who are feeling scared by that right now. But if they do it one at a time, the first one gets done in 1 week and is like 93% likely to occur. The last one gets done in week 5 and is like 60+% likely to occur. It is immensely more practical to do this one at a time. The number one objection I hear around this, I feel like it's important to address this, is people say, well, I have all these things to do. I can't, what are you telling me? Brush my teeth all day? No, this is a concept called maintenance plus one. You take all the things that are in maintenance level in your life, and those happen, right? We have to pay the bills. We have to go to the bathroom. We have to brush our teeth. We have to rest. We have to do those things. But those are a habit. Those are already included. Those are in the flow. But when we look at the things that are outside of flow, one thing, and that's where it's important to learn not just yes and no, which I talk a lot about, the importance of deciding hell yes versus no, and flipping because a regular yes is a disguised no. I talk plenty about that, but there's another phrase that gets missed, which is not now. We don't like the phrase not now, but not now is crucial and important, because you're saying these other things, if I have the 5, they will get done. It's just one has to come first.
So the other objection that I'm coming up with, what about this bright shiny object thing? Because I've got my 5 tasks, which are going to take me 10 weeks or not, and I'm focused on the week 1, and I'm getting on with this. But hello,
I'm laughing because I mentioned I was teaching this earlier, and the exact follow-up question that you just asked was the follow-up question that got asked in that class as well. It almost always does.
I'm being honest here because I know that I am have been so guilty of this one.
I'm the same way, right? Like, I'm no different than that. It's the same. So here's how you solve that. And it goes a little bit deeper, and there's a lot more training that can be done in this area. But the simple way to think about solving that is, if you keep a list of all of the things that move you the furthest, the fastest toward your North Star, and then this thing,
vision, isn't it?
Right, it is. But now we're going to give you a decision filter that's going to help it. I'll give you the psychological trick that will release the shiny object. I will give that to you, I promise. And it's not even far down the path. So if you encounter new shiny object, it flies up to you and it goes, hi, I'd like you to focus on me. You can ask question number one. Does this thing, if I were to do it, move me toward my North Star or further away? If the answer is that it moves you further away, then it should go away. And your mind will usually release it because you look at it and go, yeah, that's nice, but it doesn't take me anywhere I want to go. So it doesn't really matter. Like that's less of a concern. If it moves you toward your North Star, now you ask question number two, which is there anything else that moves me further, faster? So basically you look at your list of things that move you to your North Star, and we're almost to the psychological trick. And you look at the first one and you go, does this move me further, faster than that? By the way, if the answer is yes, then you might release the one you were doing and say, this is the one. I did that when I went to Asia. I stopped everything else I was doing and went to Asia on a speaking tour because it came up and I knew it was the furthest, the fastest. And I made a huge, massive decision in just a short time and decided to go in and change my life. And I knew that. So sometimes that happens. The other 99.8% of the time, when we ask and it goes, well, no, it's really cool. It's really fun, but it's not number one. We look and we go number two, number three, number four. And maybe you get to like number five and you go, yeah, it moves me faster than number five. And here's the first part of the psychological trick. There's two parts. There's really two tricks. The first one, and this is the most important one, is write it down in the number 6 slot or the number 5 slot, wherever it fits, right? When you write it down, because you physically manifested it and because you scheduled it in a way that it will happen, your mind releases it. Your mind will go, oh, it's going to happen. It has a place. It's now not new and shiny. Now it's a planned event. And since it's a planned event, my mind releases it. And it's really magic how that physical manifestation of it in a scheduled place takes the pressure off. For those of you who are saying, yeah, but what if I've got one that I'm just super excited about and it's like number 10 on my list, because that is the next natural question. Here's what you can do. When you plan your work hours, everything is maintenance plus 1. But when you plan your life, you've got some hobby hours that you plan. And in my mind, the way I teach calendaring, which is a very releasing, beautiful, freeing way, you have some hours that are hobby hours. It is okay to take that thing that's number 10. And if you go, man, I love that. It's so much fun. I want to do it. It can't justify being number 1. It can't justify being in my business right now because it would slow me from getting the momentum. I can put it in my hobby hour. I can do it outside of my scheduled business hours and still do the thing, even though it's related to my business, because it won't take away from the momentum I'm in my business because it's in a different slot. I did this a couple of years ago when I was looking at TikTok. I knew, I never thought I'd be on TikTok at all. And now I am, but I knew that I wanted to try it. Like I was excited. I was like, ooh, but on my list, it was like number 14. I can't justify doing that in my business hours. So I had an hour that I set aside for either TV or video games to mentally release each night. Mm-hmm. And for 1 month, I decided to trade that hour out for a TikTok hour for number 14 or whatever on my list. Mm-hmm. And so I found a way to put it in because it was fun and it mattered to me and it was really cool. It wasn't shiny anymore because I'd put it on my list, but it triggered me enough to where I went, yeah, cool, I want to do it. So that's like the sneaky way out the back door, basically. But the psychological trick is put it on that list and schedule it, and your mind will release it.
It is. It's about writing things down, isn't it? Not trying to hold everything in here, because that's where the overthinking carries on. Because have I done this? Have I done that? Have I done?
Well, you know what it's about. Vague is overwhelming, specific is achievable, because when it's in your head and it's a maybe, and I don't know when it's going to be, and I'd like to do it and I'd like to explore it, that's vague. When it's on a list in a scheduled place, it's specific. Mm-hmm. And my mind releases it.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's really powerful, really powerful. Yeah, that gives our audience a bit of an insight into your coaching style. And you've got momentum coaching, haven't you?
I do indeed. Strategic momentum.
Momentum.
And I can't even claim the name. It came from a couple of my clients who suggested the whole thing in the first place. They're amazing. If we listen to the people in our life, it's crazy how much more powerful we are as a team than we are as individuals.
And also they give us the language that describes what works for our clients.
They
And
do.
so, yeah,
Strangely enough, when you ask them, what do I do? What should I call it? They're like, it should be this because that's what you do. Oh, and then it resonates with everybody.
fine. I mean, it's like sort of opening up the head of your ideal client and rumbling around in there and going, how do you describe it? What? So, yeah. I love it. I love a bit of archaeology. Great. Thank you for that. Now, Dan, you've also got something very special coming up in Bali next year. Tell us a bit more about that and also why this is so important to you.
Thank you. 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago, I was very fortunate to be able to go to Asia. And it started because I met an individual named Ricky, and I was introduced to him and we started talking. And my number one core belief in the world is people matter most and relationships are everything. And I also believe that we should focus upon 5 key people. I think we become the average of the 5 people we spend the most time around. I readjust that every quarter. I started talking with him and I was like, I want to learn more about this guy. So I largely spontaneously said, I'm coming there. 10 days later, I went for a few days. On the way back, we had a conversation. I got back. We had another conversation. We decided to create a speaking event called Freedom Summit Global, where we went and traveled with many top speakers from around the world for 45 days. I went and did that. And in doing that, it so happened that I was sharing a story about my mother, who is, man, single mothers are just the hugest heroes in the world to me. And my mother is one of the most powerful figures in my life. She was far from perfect, and that was part of what I was sharing. But I stand here on her shoulders from the sacrifices that she made for me. And my mother had passed 25 years ago this coming year, 20 years ago as of that year. And I was sharing a story called Dreams Are Real, Overcoming Our Own Objections to Create the Life We Want. And just talking about overcoming objections and overcoming our past and all of that. And on the day of the 20th anniversary of my mother's passing, I was in Bali speaking on a stage on that day. And I was in tears. That audience held me up. And it was also during that part of the trip, within a day of that I had one of the more iconic moments of my life, my career, take whatever you will, where I was doing a coaching call while sitting on a balcony overlooking the beach in Bali. And it was just incredible of the life I had dreamed of, being able to help people while being in this beautiful place, and then speaking and sharing her story, that it was so powerful. And all of those moments changed my life. Well, now this coming year, which will be the 25th anniversary of her passing, I'm going back to Bali to honor her and to honor that space that changed my life, that really unlocked the calm and clarity of my life. And we're hosting a calm and clarity retreat to transform others' lives as well. It'll be a truly transformative experience. We're also going to have amazing adventures. We're going to do, it looks like 4-wheel riding in volcanic craters. We're going to go out and be with the elephants. We're going to go out and do surfing in the shallow waters of the ocean there. We're going to have celebrations. And we're going to do transformative coaching. Like, this will be a true calm, clarity, focus, life transformation. And I'm so excited to be doing that in the middle of April this coming year as our first annual calm and clarity retreat.
Oh, cool. And will you continue to do them in Bali?
That's the question. And I don't have that answer. I'd like to shift locations, but what may happen is I do one in Bali every year, and then I do a second one, and we rotate the locations. We're still sorting that out. What I can commit to now is I know when this one is and where it is, and that we're going to be like 5-star resort. It's everything. The way that I like to do retreats is everything is included other than airfare. Airfare I can't, because some people are coming from 5 minutes away and it'll be a $50 flight, and some people are coming from across the world, but everything else from the time you get off the plane to the time you get back on is completely included. And we want to take care of people, but make it this magical experience that transforms lives. Well, and of course, story will be involved. Go ahead.
If you haven't got anything to worry about, you haven't got your 5 things that are on your list, your right. One thing that's on the list is to be here at this retreat.
That's right.
learn.
We want presence, right? We can
Exactly.
we can leverage that eagerness rather than impatience.
Ooh, yes. And then Bali is a good place to be in terms of letting go of.
It really is. Yeah, Bali is a magical place for sure. And
I have yet
it's,
to go. I have yet to go.
well, there you go. It
And the
is,
thing is, the daft thing is, it actually is cheaper for me to fly to Bali from Perth than it is for me to fly to Melbourne.
that's insane.
I know. Ridiculous, isn't it?
It is. I it surprised me so much what it was like to get around in that part of the world, especially to travel among the different countries in Asia when I was there. I had no idea before I went, and I was blown away. It's easier to go between countries there than it is to go between states in the US.
Yeah. Well, they're very grateful for all the tourist people because it keeps the economy alive.
They are. And now I have a bunch of friends who live there, and that's fun as well. And we'll connect with them and help. And some of them are helping us make the experience that much stronger, but it will be beautiful. It currently looks like I'll be able to take 15 heart-centered humans on this trip.
15. Great. Well, that's really exciting. Thank you for sharing not just the fact that you've got this coming up, but for me, even more importantly, the why behind it. And that connection is really precious. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for giving me the space to do so. I passionately believe that the why behind the what in all that we do matters. Just like I believe, as I know you do as well, that story is the most powerful thing that we have, and our story is the most unique thing we have. And that when we share the good and the bad, it can help people. But when we share the ugly, it transforms lives. And so stepping into that space is so important.
Yeah. And the ugly is where, as you say, where the transformation happens. When, as a speaker, you've gone through your transformation, sharing your story while it's still raw. And one of the things, so because I work a lot with speakers who have some very powerful origin stories, I'm very clear that this is not catharsis. Getting on stage is not your catharsis. This is something that you are sharing from a position of distance. You've been there, you've learned, you still anchor into those feelings. However, you're not, what was the way you described it? You're not living there.
Trauma dumping.
Not trauma.
Right? That's
exactly.
Which I went through that phase. I will say that I believe there is a space when you are going through things, and this is just my perspective, but I believe that there is a space where when you share in the middle, when you're not sure what's going to happen. So this isn't after the trauma when you're processing it, right? This isn't when you're in that trauma dumping phase, but I believe there's a space when you're going through whatever the thing is, and you don't know how it's going to come, and you're living by your principles, that when you share from there, it can act as an amplifier. But whereas often when you share afterward, when it's all wrapped up and tidy and neat in a bow, it can be an echo. And I think both are crucial. And there's a lot of things that are not great to share in the middle, like it isn't right, it isn't the space. But there can be power, especially if you're in a healed place in general, if you're living by your principles, even if you're going through really hard things, to show people what it is like to go through hard things, not as a victim, right? Not as someone who needs saving. And I think that's a core of what I hear you getting at there is, look, I'm not out here to be a victim. I'm not out here to say, woe is me. I'm not out here to say I need saving. Look, I love support, but I don't need saving. Yes. And that's such an important and crucial piece at the same. You're right. That distinction matters. And I'm not here to share my pain for the pain. I'm here to share what I'm going through for the hope that it provides. Yeah. And if I can do that, it can be an amplifier. But if I'm not in a space to do that, or I haven't done the healing to do that, or I haven't got myself there, then I agree with you completely. Stage is not time to be your therapy session. No. And I agree with that.
When I'm working with speakers who've been through that, and some of them still are going through the angst of what the life lesson that they're going through at the moment, I'm very keen that I have a duty of care to those speakers. So that, yes, you're telling your story in a way that is engaging and bringing people in, and not underscoring / underlining, depending where in the world you are, underscoring your trauma. Because one of the reasons that a lot of people don't share their story is because they don't want to re-traumatize themselves.
Right.
So there's a way of describing what you do that still taps into the emotion without you going through it again and re-traumatizing yourself. And that's something that I'm very clear about with the speakers I work with.
That's really important. And I spent probably too much time doing that, making that mistake myself. And then I've learned, like you say, being able to tap into it is important because it has to be real when you share.
Oh, yes.
It is important that you're able to tap into it. But if you tap into it and it does damage to you to tap into it, that's not a good or healthy thing for you, or, by the way, for the person you're sharing with, because then rather than helping them be inspired by what you went through, you're transferring your trauma to them. Yeah. And I want to have a connection with them, but I'm not looking to transfer my trauma to them. I'm not looking to make life harder for other people. I want to give people hope and connection and well, the two things I believe that we all want: connection and movement. We all want to feel understood and seen and felt and heard and valued. And we all want to have movement. And if we feel stuck or spinning, it hurts. And if we feel unseen or unheard, it hurts. But if we have both connection and movement, we win. If I can't transfer that to you as a speaker, then what else am I doing? Or if I'm transferring something else to you as a speaker, then I'm probably not connecting in the way that is healthy. Exactly.
Thank you for sharing that. And on that front, you mentioned a couple of phrases which, in our pre-conversation, leading me on to, as we're wrapping up, internal scripts. Now, you know, and all my audience know that I'm very keen on internal scripts because, yeah, your words have power. So what are the things, sometimes we tell ourselves, those little voices in our heads that sit on the shoulder and go, and can be disempowering. They can be limiting. On the other hand, there are some positive, some empowering scripts that we have. And if we listen to those, it helps move life along. As you were saying, living by principles, even if we're still going through a load of crap, you listen to these voices and you put those disempowering scripts to one side. So I'm going to ask you, Dan, can you share with us one, maybe two of your powerful internal scripts? Share with our audience, please.
I will. I'd like to share can I share a lesson I've learned and a script that is related exactly to this? All right. So the lesson that I learned was really about that voice that speaks to you. And I learned it from Twitter. I'd love to tell you I learned it from some other place. I learned it really from Twitter through my ex-wife, which also means I didn't listen to it at first. She came to me one day several years ago. She said, I got this really great advice from Twitter. And I'm like, okay. And she told me, and then several years later when I needed it, I finally listened. And what she said and what she had read was that part of the challenge we run into is that internal voice is inside our head. But if we name it, and if we externalize it, even grabbing something like, I actually have next to me, it's not quite in arm's reach, a little stuffed animal that I've named it. Mine is named Harold. And Harold is amazing because he's a jerk, right? There you go, right? Name it and yell at it instead of yelling at you. And I've found that makes a huge difference for me. It changed my perspective as I stopped yelling at me. I've thrown Harold into the wall a few times. I'm not going to say I haven't. Harold's not a great guy, but that was powerful because I've had so many negative scripts running for so long. Like I would hear I quit and just all these other things that were so negatively powerful. Earlier this year, I went to a retreat that was very powerful for me, and it was interesting. It was very powerful. The thing I'm going to share happened before the retreat, but after I arrived. There were three things in the world that rejuvenate me. One of them is the ocean. I was standing along the ocean. I hadn't been there in years. I felt the ocean pouring into me. I had a few hours before the retreat started, and I went and I processed, and I was thinking and asking and just really working through all the craziness of my life and getting into this beautiful space. I wanted to open myself to be there and receiving. And what came up was something that I had never heard sincerely in my head before, And it is the most powerful thing that has come out as a script this year by far. I am proud of the man I've become. Never in my life, in almost 50 years, had I been able to sincerely say those words. Now, I've been able to say, because my definition of success changed, so I was able to say I am successful. And so I understood that. I'd found my resonance. I'd done a lot, but never had I gotten to a spot where like I'd have been proud of a thing, but never had I been proud of me. And I am proud of the man I'm becoming. I am excited for the man that I am proud of the man I have become. I am excited for the man I'm becoming.
Right.
And that script has stuck with me so deeply and so just powerfully resonating in seismic levels that I did not connect with. I hadn't realized until that moment that I'd never been able to say that, but it opened up and it's allowed me, we talked earlier, it's allowed me to be calm in other different ways because I am proud of the man that I've become. So it's not about the doubt and the insecurity.
That's a very powerful I am statement. And what I'm hearing is you're proud of the now and excited to continue the journey.
Yes.
It's not a one and done.
Yep. It's very, I think it's a good representation of that eagerness, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, that's really special. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Thank you for asking that powerful question. I love that question.
Those internal scripts are so powerful, aren't they? And I love the idea, and thank you for reminding me of externalizing it. I have a rat because the rat represents all sorts of things because I'm not very fond of rats. So thank you for reminding me of that one.
You are very welcome. I love that I got to see the rat. That's awesome.
I've actually got a small version on my key ring, my key fob.
Nice.
So when I get to the car, I've got that there just in case. Road rage is not an issue for me, but just in case there's any issue with it.
Right. You got to have it. I like the idea of having a travel size version. That's so great.
And it also means that when I laid my keys down, I can easily identify where they are because you've got
right. That's helpful too.
Attached to it. So yeah. Thank you so much, Dan. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Is there anything else we've missed off, or have we covered all that you want to cover?
I feel very complete. I just believe so much that people matter most, and that each person who listens should remember that they are valid and valuable, that their story matters. And I know that their words have power because I keep seeing that and hearing that. And I love the message that you trumpet through the world with your beautiful spirit. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you. Okay, guys, we will put all of Dan's contact information in the show notes. Please do get in touch with him. If that Bali trip spoke to you, don't hang around. Remember, there were only 15 places available. So we will put all this information in the show notes. Do connect with this gorgeous man. For now, bye from us.